You must be exhausted from the experiment. Let me clean the equipment. Sarah's sweet, delicate voice rang out. The pink cheongsam she wore made her look even more charming and endearing. No need for that. How could we, as men, let a young lady like you do the cleaning? What are we here for? My brother, Ethan, reached for the test tubes, ready to clean them. Sarah, take a break for a while. Once we're done, we can all grab dinner together. My fiancé, Noah, chimed in. With his gold-rimmed glasses and a warm, gentle smile, he looked every bit as refined as always. Sarah stuck out her tongue playfully. Since when do boys wash flasks and bottles? That's a girl's job. You guys can clean up the other stuff instead. Seeing her so insistent, Ethan and Noah exchanged glances and moved aside to organize the other equipment. As soon as the boys left, Sarah dropped her facade. She carelessly dumped all the test tubes and flasks into the sink, some still half filled with nitric and perchloric acid. My heart skipped a beat. Finally, I understood the cause of the explosion in my past life. Emily, why are you just standing there? Get over here and help me, Sarah commanded arrogantly. Sure. You wrote the experiment paper and designed the project, but the manual work still needs to be shared. I took several steps back and replied calmly. Nitric acid and perchloric acid can't be mixed with other solutions. You also shouldn't wear a skirt in the lab. Pants, gloves, and goggles are mandatory. These are basic safety rules. How can you be a senior and still not know this? In my past life, I was a typical overachiever, always focused on research papers and experiments. I never refused when they wanted their names on my projects, which made them think I was easygoing, easy to bully. That's why I ended up being cyberbullied, doused with sulfuric acid by a rival student, and dying in agony with my body covered in chemical burns. I could have achieved groundbreaking work in nanotechnology, elevating my school's research to new heights. Instead, my future was destroyed by these selfish, malicious people. Fine, fine. I'll remember next time. You're so naggy, Sarah scoffed, rolling her eyes before showing off her oversized zircon nails. You see my nails, don't you? They're brand new and can't touch water. So, you'll wash everything today. I let out a cold laugh and flatly refused. Ethan and Noah offered to help earlier, but you insisted on doing it yourself. Now you can handle it. Hearing my rejection, Sarah's expression darkened. She quietly slid a bottle of hydrochloric acid off the table and hid it. Then she raised her voice dramatically. Emily, I admit I'm not as smart as you. That's why I usually follow your lead. But do you really have to humiliate me like this? As she shouted, she suddenly threw the hydrochloric acid onto the nitric and perchloric acid. Flames erupted instantly, spreading rapidly. So, it was all premeditated. Help me, Emily, Sarah screamed, surrounded by crimson flames. Her face was full of panic, but her eyes were unervingly calm. She was betting on my kindness, on the assumption that I would save her because I was compassionate and forgiving. In my past life, I did save her, but she pushed me into the flames instead, leading to my agonizing death and disgrace. The trust of my mentor, the love of my parents, the respect of my peers, all gone. I was left to bear their scorn and hatred alone. But not this time. I simply stood on the other side of the flames, smiled faintly, and said, Oh dear, the fire's too big. I'll go get someone to help you, I said, picking up the experiment data report and turning to leave. Behind me, Sarah's frantic screams filled the air. Emily Sue, you can't leave. Get back here and save me. You have to save me. When the fire first started, she could have run out. Instead, she deliberately reached out a hand, expecting me to pull her to safety. Now, the fire had spread too far. An escape was impossible. As I walked out of the lab, I ran into Ethan and Noah, who were coming back with milkshakes in hand. Mango flavor, Sarah's favorite, but I didn't like mango at all. Emily, why are you out here alone? Where's Sarah? Is she slacking off and refusing to wash the equipment? Ethan asked teasingly, then added with a grin. You should learn from Sarah. Talk softer. Act sweeter. That's how you win a man's heart. He nudged Noah with his elbow. Isn't that right? Future brother-in-law. Noah adjusted his gold-rimmed glasses and smiled faintly. Sarah's personality is indeed quite charming. Emily, it wouldn't hurt for you to pick up a few things from her. I let out a cold laugh. So, this was my own brother and my fiancé. One always undermined me while flattering Sarah, and the other called me by my full name but used a cute nickname for her. In my past life, I never noticed any of this. There were times when junior classmates subtly hinted at something, mentioning seeing Noah and Sarah at the movies, acting intimately. When I confronted Noah, he claimed Ethan had been with them and that the three of them had gone together. He explained he hadn't interrupted me because I was busy in the lab. He even told me not to trust the juniors. They were just jealous of being left out of my projects and trying to sow discord between us. And I believed him without hesitation. After all, my own brother backed him up. Why would Ethan lie to me? But Ethan didn't just lie to me. He helped orchestrate my demise. Sarah's inside washing the equipment. I said with a sarcastic smile. She mentioned her new nails make it difficult. Though, if someone could help her, that'd be great. As soon as the words left my mouth, Ethan and Noah rushed eagerly into the lab to assist her. I glanced at my watch. It had been 3 minutes since the fire started. Sarah was likely already covered in burns. There was no way they would let their precious Sarah perish in the flames. They'd rescue her, no matter what. Sure enough, chaos ensued. By the time they were all rushed to the hospital, Sarah was covered in burns. Her pitiful face, however, remained miraculously unscathed. Noah had a fractured leg from debris that fell while rescuing Sarah. Ethan, shielding her with his body, suffered severe burns across his back and right arm. The scene was heart-wrenching, with classmates marveling at their heroism. Why did Emily do this to me? Sarah sobbed, her voice trembling as tears streamed down her uninjured face. She could have saved me. I wouldn't be like this if she had helped. When the fire started, I reached out to her, but she turned and left. If it weren't for her, I wouldn't be burned like this. My life is ruined. Her emotional outburst not only enraged Ethan and Noah, but also stirred up the classmates nearby. Their expressions ranged from doubt to condemnation. The professor frowned, clearly skeptical of Sarah's story. Emily doesn't seem like the kind of person to act that way, he said. I'll get to the bottom of this. But Sarah's theatrics had already worked on many of the students, who began voicing their accusations against me, emboldened by her manipulations. I know Emily Sue is your star pupil, but Sarah's in this condition now. Even if you favor her, there must be a limit. One student complained. Yes, no matter how talented a student is, if they lack good character, they become a bigger threat to society. We demand that Emily be dealt with seriously. Another added. The murmurs grew louder, and the professor struggled to maintain control. Finally, he turned to Ethan and Noah, hoping to find some clarity. You two are the closest to Emily. Do you believe she's capable of something like this? He asked, clearly expecting their support to buy time for a proper investigation. Ethan was the first to respond, pouring cold water on any hope I had. Professor, my sister's personality can be unusual at times, hard to understand. The professor's eyes flickered with disappointment as he turned to Noah, my fiancé, with a glimmer of hope. Everyone at school knew how well Noah treated me, bringing me meals 3 times a day, reserving library seats for me, delivering umbrellas in the rain, even driving 3 hours just to buy my favorite soup dumplings. But now, his face was cold, as if he were addressing an enemy. Professor, the facts are right in front of us. It's hard not to believe them. I wish she wasn't this kind of person, but unfortunately, she is. Their words sealed my fate. The professor seemed to age 10 years in an instant, his posture sagging under the weight of betrayal. Sarah, I heard you were burned. Are you okay? I suddenly entered the room, deliberately wearing an expression of concern. When I left, you were perfectly fine. You mentioned your new nails made it hard to wash the equipment, so I thought I'd head back to class to work on the report since the professor needed it urgently. On my way, I even ran into Ethan and Noah and asked them to help you with the cleaning. What were the 3 of you doing? How did a fire break out? I crossed my arms, scolding them with an indignant expression. You're all seniors now, but your hands-on skills are still so poor. Didn't I already tell you not to do experiments when I'm not around? And now look, Sarah is seriously injured. This is unacceptable. My tone was sharp, and my performance flawless. far outshining their earlier attempts at acting. Sarah, lying on the hospital bed, was stunned into silence. Ethan and Noah looked equally baffled, unable to process my sudden shift. The professor's eyes lit up with hope. Emily, is what you're saying true? You didn't leave Sarah to fend for herself in the fire. I frowned, tilting my head in confusion. What do you mean, Professor? I don't understand at all. Sarah suddenly erupted in a hysterical scream. Emily Sue, stop pretending. You were right next to me when the fire broke out. I begged you to help me, and you said you'd get someone else to save me. I pressed my lips together, suppressing the smile threatening to break free. So, she finally understood how it felt to be wronged, helpless, and suffocated by injustice. I was simply treating her the same way she had treated me. Why was she losing her mind over it now? Oh, Sarah, how could you accuse me of such a thing? I said, feigning hurt. Remember, no one wanted to work with you on experiments because of your poor skills. I was the one who partnered with you and stayed up late helping you with your reports and data. And last winter, when you wore sheer tights in sub-zero temperatures to meet someone for a date and nearly froze your face. Who was it that stayed up all night massaging and treating you? Sarah's face twisted in anger and disbelief. But I wasn't done yet. My words were calm, but the meaning behind them was sharp enough to cut through her feigned innocence. In the end, I even caught your cold, which nearly turned into pneumonia. Since I tend to keep a low profile, I didn't make a big deal about it, but a few classmates knew. Several of them stepped forward to testify. I was in the neighboring dorm room and saw everything clearly. It's true. Yeah, I've known Emily Sue for years. She doesn't talk much, but she's genuinely kind. She'd never leave someone in need. If this were about anyone else, I might believe it, but Emily would never do something like that. Hearing this, Sarah looked like she might spit blood. Suddenly, a thought seemed to strike her, and she shouted, "Check the hallway cameras. Look at when Emily left and compare it to the time Noah and Ethan came in to save me. The timing of the fire spreading will make it clear she didn't help me. She stood by and let it happen," she added, her voice rising in frustration. If I'm lying, what's the point? Why would I deliberately burn myself just to frame her? Who would do that? Her words sounded logical, and the crowd turned their questioning eyes toward me again. It's true that a normal person wouldn't use self-inflicted burns to frame someone, but Sarah would, because she's anything but normal. Ethan jumped in, playing along. Emily, just tell the truth. Were you scared and decided not to help her? Don't worry. No one will blame you. Sarah's such a simple and innocent girl. She wouldn't accuse you without reason. I feigned hesitation for a moment, then sharply slapped Ethan on the back. He gasped in pain, his white bandages instantly soaking through with blood. Oh no. I'm sorry, Ethan. I got too emotional and forgot about your injury, I said, my voice full of mock concern. Ethan clenched his jaw, clearly in agony, but forced a smile to reassure me. It's fine. Just tell me, did you really not help her? I shook my head resolutely. No, I didn't. Finally, I understood why Sarah was so insistent on accusing me. It had to be because I refused to clean the test tubes earlier and pointed out that her attire didn't meet lab safety standards. I'd reminded her that nitric and perchloric acids couldn't be mixed with other substances because it was dangerous and explosive. And I'd told her wearing a skirt without goggles was unacceptable. That must have been when she started holding a grudge. I sighed dramatically. Sarah, if you'd followed basic lab rules, you wouldn't have ended up with such severe burns. The classmates around us now looked at Sarah with mixed emotions. After all, in my 4 years at college, I'd helped countless classmates and brought the school numerous honors. I was a model student with no history of wrongdoing. Sarah, on the other hand, was infamous for her poor grades, shamelessly flirting with men, and even stealing others' boyfriends. Her reputation wasn't spotless by any means. As for the lab hallway cameras, they'd been broken for months. Sarah was at a loss for words. Furious, she nearly lunged off the hospital bed to strangle me. Her bloodshot eyes glared at me, twisted with rage and fear. I smirked coldly. What, Sarah? Didn't I already die tragically in my previous life? I remarked, my tone icy. Before leaving, I dropped a bombshell. By the way, the mentors and I investigated the cause of the fire. It turns out nitric and perchloric acids mixed with hydrochloric acid, triggering the explosion. I saw with my own eyes that you threw the nitric and perchloric acids into the sink. The hydrochloric acid bottle was a meter away from the sink. Couldn't have spilled accidentally. So, this wasn't an accident. Investigators will be coming to question you about the details soon. Sarah, who had been hysterical moments before, suddenly quieted down. Her eyes darted around nervously, guilt written all over her face. In my past life, I'd been so gravely injured that I was unconscious for 2 days. By the time I woke up, the blame had already been pinned on me. Ethan and Noah both pressured me to accept responsibility, saying the damage was done and that my life was already ruined. They begged me not to destroy Sarah's future on top of everything else. But this time, it's Sarah's future that's destroyed. I wanted to see how they would talk their way out of this. As I stepped out of the hospital room, the professor approached me, his voice filled with relief. Thank goodness this had nothing to do with you, Emily. Otherwise, I wouldn't have known if I could even save you with this old face of mine. A warmth spread through my chest, and I felt a lump rise in my throat. In my past life, the professor was the only one who tirelessly advocated for me after the incident, trying to prevent the school from expelling me. He even sought out the world's top dermatologists, hoping to restore me to normal. But in the end, I let him down, dying in a rotting, filthy corner of the world. This time, I wouldn't let that happen. The professor continued, his tone both pleased and regretful. The thing I'm happiest about is that you managed to save the results of your 10 years of hard work. It would have been such a shame if it had been destroyed in the fire. He patted my shoulder, his voice heavy with meaning. If you lose 10 years' worth of experiments, you can always spend another 10 years. But life is the most precious thing of all. The experiment is finished now. From here on, you'll work with me on other projects. Just you. Don't bring anyone else along. Though he didn't say it outright, I understood what he meant. Sarah's character was questionable, and my brother Ethan and Noah had disappointed him deeply. I nodded obediently. Yes, Professor. I understand. Satisfied, the professor left to handle the follow-up to the lab explosion. Since neither I nor his prized research were implicated, he no longer needed to tread carefully. As soon as he was out of sight, Ethan and Noah appeared, trying to act concerned. Emily, it's a good thing you weren't in the lab during the fire. If you'd gotten hurt, Mom would have skinned me alive, Ethan said with a fawning smile. Noah chimed in. You have no idea how intense that fire was, especially when it exploded at the end. We almost didn't make it out. That moment, all I could think about was how I had to survive. For you, I couldn't bear to leave you alone. I looked at them, my expression neutral. But inside, I saw them as nothing more than clowns. Ethan, visibly nervous, rubbed his nose and added, about what happened in the hospital earlier. We didn't think it through. That's why we misunderstood you. But you have to believe us. Noah and I love you more than anyone in the world. We'd never hurt you. Please forgive us this time. I smirked, the gesture casual. Sure. It's not like this is the first time you've taken Sarah's side. I'm used to it. But this will be the last time. If it happens again, I won't care about you anymore. My words made them exchange glances, their earlier resolve to defend Sarah now wavering. They knew me well enough to understand that while I was usually forgiving, once I got truly angry, nothing they said would matter. Still, Ethan hesitated, asking cautiously, Emily, weren't you close with Sarah before? Now she's so badly injured and might even face punishment from the school. Don't you feel sorry for her? I let out a cold laugh. You were supposed to clean the equipment. She insisted on taking over but didn't follow even the most basic safety rules. Middle schoolers know that mixing nitric acid, perchloric acid, and hydrochloric acid causes explosions. If she wasn't doing it on purpose, then she was just reckless. And if she was doing it on purpose, then she deserves whatever she gets. On top of that, she tried to frame me for standing by and letting her get hurt, hoping to ruin my reputation. Do you know what that means for my future? Who would ever trust me in a research project again? Someone so stupid and malicious. Why should I pity her? As I finished, classmates began filing out of the hospital room. Having overheard my words, many nodded in agreement. Thank goodness you saved the professor's 10 years of experimental results. If Sarah's fire had destroyed it, we'd be talking about losses in the millions. One of them commented. Hearing this, even more classmates chimed in their approval, their expressions now filled with disdain for Sarah. How can someone be so malicious? A classmate said in disbelief. Not only did she refuse to apologize for her mistake, but she even tried to drag someone else down with her. How did someone with that kind of intelligence even get into our school? I don't get it either. Another added. I think expelling her is too lenient. She should be made to pay for the damages. She's insane. Hearing these remarks, Ethan and Noah exchanged awkward glances. Any thought of pleading for Sarah disappeared instantly. Even if they had been foolish enough to want to take the blame for her, it wouldn't have mattered. I was the third person to leave the lab, and my experiment protocols and reports were meticulously detailed. The conclusion was undeniable. Sarah was expelled. The news spread like wildfire in the media, making her infamous. Normally, an accidental lab explosion wouldn't result in expulsion, but deliberate misconduct? That's intentional and could even lead to criminal charges. Sarah claimed she hadn't done it on purpose, but as a senior about to graduate, she should have known that mixing nitric acid, perchloric acid, and hydrochloric acid would cause an explosion. If she didn't, our school would become a laughingstock in the academic world. Before she was discharged from the hospital, her belongings were packed up from the dorm and delivered to her. When Sarah saw me visiting the hospital, her anger boiled over. She screamed hysterically, Emily Sue, I've been expelled. Are you happy now? I smiled faintly. It's not just me. Everyone at school is satisfied. After all, anyone working with you in a lab would be risking their life. Ethan frowned, displeased. Emily, why are you being so harsh? You've never spoken like this before. I raised my eyebrows, feigning incredulity. Ethan, who's your sister? Me or Sarah? She deliberately caused an explosion, likely to harm me. Your biological sister. Yet you're still defending her. I'm so disappointed in you. Ethan froze, unable to respond, caught completely off guard by my words. Noah immediately stepped in, attempting damage control. Emily, don't listen to those gossipy classmates. Sarah is a kind person. She would never do something like that on purpose. The fire was just an accident. I turned to Noah, my gaze sharp, a mocking smile tugging at my lips. Noah, you've known me for over a decade and always call me by my full name. You've only known Sarah for 3 years, and yet you call her by her nickname so intimately. How interesting. Noah flinched, his gaze darting away from mine. I'm just used to following Ethan's lead. That's why I call you that. I raised an eyebrow, scoffing. Ethan always calls me Emily, yet you never picked up that habit. Funny how selective your habits are. Noah scratched his nose, his guilt plain as day. From now on, I'll call you Emily. Don't be mad. Okay. I laughed coldly. Call me Emily? Do you think you're worthy? Noah. Noah's expression darkened immediately. What do you mean by that? Emily, I already explained. It's just a habit I picked up from Ethan. Do you really have to blow this out of proportion? Why can't you be more understanding? Like Sarah. I didn't even hesitate. I raised my hand and slapped him across the face. Even a dog knows to be loyal to its owner. You're not even as good as a dog. Do you think you'd be where you are today without me tutoring you, letting you piggyback on my experiments, and adding your name to my work? And your parents' failing company? Without my family's help, it would have gone bankrupt ages ago. I said coldly. Oh, and by the way, I've already sent the photos of you and Sarah fooling around to my parents. Our engagement is in the process of being annulled. With that, I pulled out a stack of photos from my bag and flung them at Noah's face. The pictures scattered like snowflakes in the air, showing him and Sarah being intimate at the movies, feeding each other at trendy restaurants, holding hands romantically on a beach, and even kissing in bikinis. I had spent a bit of money on a private investigator, who also managed to obtain their hotel check-in records. Noah frantically bent down to pick up the photos, but there were too many for him to gather quickly. Meanwhile, Ethan caught a glimpse of the pictures, and his face turned ashen. He looked at Noah, then at Sarah, as if the betrayal had struck him like a physical blow. It was obvious that Ethan had been spending a fortune on Sarah over the years, showering her with lavish gifts from luxury brands. Though their relationship was ambiguous, Sarah had always kept things flirtatious and intimate enough to keep him hooked. But Sarah's true nature was undeniable. She was fixated on everything that belonged to me. Noah suddenly dropped to his knees, tears streaming down his face. Emily, I was wrong. I'll never do it again. Please, just give me another chance. I can't lose our engagement. My parents will kill me if you call it off. He was genuinely panicking now, but regret came too late. There's no remedy for past mistakes. I bent down, gripping his chin tightly. My tone was mocking and full of disdain. Sorry, I'm not a garbage collector. Don't ever show your face in front of me again. Otherwise, I'll revoke all the experiment credits I gave you. Enjoy extending your graduation. Noah collapsed to the ground, his face pale and lifeless. He knew me well enough to understand that I rarely got angry, but once I made up my mind, no one could change it. Before leaving, I turned to Sarah for one last jab. Congratulations, Sarah. 3rd-degree burns? You're officially disabled now. At least you'll get discounts at tourist attractions in the future. Sarah nearly jumped off the hospital bed in fury, screaming, Emily Sue, you bitch, get out of here. I never want to see you again. I waved cheerfully. Sure thing. I'm afraid if I see too much of you, I'll have nightmares. Her hysteria intensified, and she started cursing me even more. To me, her rage was music to my ears, a triumphant fanfare. True to their word, my parents moved quickly. The next day, the announcement of my annulled engagement to Noah was splashed across the newspapers. At dinner that evening, my mom shook her head in disbelief while placing food on my plate. It's true what they say. You never really know someone. We've known Noah since he was a child. But who would have thought he was capable of something like this? I nodded in agreement. Exactly. But luckily, I take after you. Mom, I know when to cut my losses and move on. Then I added with a smile. Oh, by the way, can you and Dad have a talk with Ethan? Ethan was still at the hospital, staying by Sarah's side. It had been 2 weeks, and he hadn't attended a single class. The professors warned that if he missed any more, he would fail his courses. Dad was furious. He called Ethan and unleashed his wrath. Ethan Sue, I've spent a fortune sending you to school, not so you could chase after women, and now you're skipping classes and risking failing? Who gave you the guts to pull something like this? Get back here right now. If I don't see you in 30 minutes, don't bother coming home again. It didn't even take 30 minutes. Within 15 minutes, Ethan came rushing home in a panic. What greeted him was Dad, belt in hand, unleashing a storm of blows. Ethan's back and arms were soon covered in red welts, the marks glaringly bright against his skin. Ethan shot me a venomous look, but I just shrugged innocently, adding fuel to the fire. I said, Ethan, why are you looking at me like that? I'm doing this for your own good. You've studied hard for 12 years, only to risk failing your courses because of a woman? Look at me. Noah and I grew up together. We were childhood sweethearts for over a decade. But the moment he betrayed me, I ended the engagement immediately. It's not that I wasn't hurt, but I knew our family's reputation matters more than personal feelings. You need to think not just about yourself but also about Mom and Dad. They've given us the best of everything growing up. The best education. The best opportunities. Isn't it our responsibility to live up to their expectations? Mom and Dad seemed deeply moved by my words. Their gazes toward me were filled with pride and satisfaction. While they had favored Ethan in our childhood, my exceptional accomplishments and maturity had gradually shifted their perspective. With the influence of their progressive social circle, they no longer insisted on Ethan being the sole heir to the family business. Dad delivered his final ultimatum. Look at your sister. So sensible. So outstanding. You need to learn from her. If you embarrass us again, don't blame us if we cut you off completely. Ethan, still reeling from the pain, took a sharp breath and muttered, I understand. I won't disappoint you again. The beating left Ethan bedridden for a week. Similarly, Noah was also punished by his parents, who didn't hold back. He was confined at home, unable to leave. At one point, his mother even sent me photos of Noah covered in bruises. hoping to stir my sympathy and convince me to change my mind about the engagement. Instead, I saved the pictures. Whenever the cafeteria food was bland, I'd pull them out to amuse myself while eating. After I asked Noah's mother for more pictures 3 times, she finally blocked me. What a pity. So petty. While I was gleefully enjoying the situation, Sarah was at the hospital, pacing like an ant on a hot pan. She needed a skin graft but didn't have the money to pay for it. She'd been counting on Ethan and Noah to cover the cost, one on her left and the other on her right. Noah was never short on money, but now both he and Ethan were bedridden, barely alive. Forget about paying Sarah's bills. They couldn't even answer a phone call. When the optimal window for her skin graft surgery passed, Ethan was finally allowed out of bed. Under Mom's watchful eye, Ethan had blocked all of Sarah's contacts. But then I posted a carefully curated update on my private social media, visible only to Sarah. It included Ethan's detailed schedule, complete with specific times. Ethan had become Sarah's only lifeline, and she had no choice but to grab onto him. Predictably, Sarah didn't disappoint. Just a single tear from her was enough to soften Ethan's heart. He paid for her medical bills, upgraded her to a VIP hospital room, and began sneaking off to visit her after school, staying for half an hour before rushing home. On weekends, he used the excuse of playing basketball with friends to spend time at the hospital, even gifting her an LV bag. Ethan, you're so good to me, Sarah sobbed as she leaned into his arms, her tears streaming down like a delicate flower in the rain. Even when I'm like this, you don't abandon me. Without you, I wouldn't be able to go on. Don't say that, Ethan replied tenderly, kissing her on the forehead. You'll always be the most beautiful girl in my eyes. Sarah's cheeks flushed with shyness. Ethan, when I recover, I'll become your most beautiful bride. But if you're busy, don't come see me too often. Your parents might get upset. Just visit when you have time. She paused and added with a scheming tone, be careful of Emily. She's cunning and will definitely try to steal the company from you. You have to guard against her. Ethan frowned, his expression uneasy. Recently, Mom and Dad had been especially kind to him, even letting him join the company and attend executive meetings. However, I'd been with the company longer and had gained significant support from key personnel. Despite his reassurances to Sarah, he couldn't hide his lack of confidence. After all, he'd never beaten me in any competition, not even as a child. Don't worry, Sarah said sweetly. I'll make sure that never happens. Meanwhile, I received videos from the private investigator I'd hired. Watching them, I couldn't help but smirk. I was swamped, juggling my professor's project and learning company management from my parents. So outsourcing these matters to a professional saved me a lot of time. The footage was crystal clear, almost like being there in person. As graduation approached, the investigator sent me a new video. This time, a man appeared on Sarah's hospital surveillance. A slightly overweight figure with black-rimmed glasses and a vicious gleam in his eyes. I recognized him immediately. He was the student who had thrown sulfuric acid on me in my previous life, leaving me to die in agony and despair. My body trembled, a chill running down my spine. So, my death in the past wasn't an accident. It was orchestrated by Sarah. This time, sending her to hell wouldn't be too much, would it? The graduation ceremony was grand and bustling, because I had saved the experiment data and preserved 10 years of my professor's hard work, along with millions of dollars in research funding. I was chosen to deliver the commencement speech as the graduating class representative. Naturally, Mom and Dad attended the ceremony to witness this moment of honor. The teachers, seeing that I hadn't allowed Ethan's grades to be jeopardized, looked at me with approval. Ethan, who had always had a clear and guileless demeanor typical of a spoiled rich kid, now looked at me with a dark and complicated expression. I walked gracefully onto the stage and bowed elegantly. Hello, everyone. I'm Emily Sue, a member of the class of 2004. It's an honor to stand here and deliver this speech on behalf of the graduating class. Before I could finish, Sarah stepped onto the stage from the other side, holding a microphone. She wore a backless mini dress that exposed the twisted scars on her skin. Her voice trembled with emotion as she accused me. Emily Sue, you're a liar. You're not qualified to represent the graduates. I'm Sarah, the victim of the lab explosion 3 months ago. Many of you might have heard that the explosion was my fault. But that's not the truth. Tears welled up in her eyes as she continued. Emily was there during the explosion. She's the one who told me to pour the hydrochloric acid into the sink. She said it would be fine. I trusted her. So I didn't question it and did as she said. That's what caused the accident. Her voice broke as she addressed the audience. You probably think I'm stupid. And I am. Ever since I started college, I've been bullied by her. I got used to following her orders. On the surface, she's a top student, admired by everyone. But behind the scenes, she's a master manipulator and a bully. She'd intentionally tell me my experiments weren't good enough, accuse me of wasting her time, slap me dozens of times, and force me to buy her coffee, only to throw it in my face, saying it was too sweet. She even made me kneel and wash her feet with scalding water. The hall erupted into chaos. Sarah bit her lip, tears brimming but refusing to fall, looking both defiant and pitiable. There are plenty of people here who've been bullied by her. We've all graduated now. Are you still going to stay silent? Your silence will only allow her to keep hurting others. The crowd exchanged glances, scanning the room for anyone willing to speak up. That moment, Ethan stood up and declared, I'm Ethan Sue, Emily's brother. On behalf of my sister, I apologize. She's always been arrogant and domineering, and this isn't the first time she's bullied someone. I thought she'd changed, but clearly, she hasn't. The two of them, Ethan and Sarah, worked together seamlessly to frame me. It was almost laughable. Suppressing a scoff, I calmly turned around and clicked to reveal the next slide on the projector. The screen lit up with a video of Ethan and Sarah in a hospital room, clearly engaging in an intimate encounter. Of course, the critical parts were pixelated, but their voices and figures were unmistakable. The audience erupted into an uproar, gasping and murmuring in disbelief. I turned back to the microphone and said, slowly and deliberately, Ethan, didn't you say you wanted to protect your classmates? Is this how you protect them? By taking it to the bed? And now you have the audacity to turn around and slander me, your own sister. I turned my attention to Sarah, smirking. And you, Sarah, truly impressive. One moment you're in bed with my ex-fiancé, and the next, you're cozying up to my brother. With your talent for seducing men, you could write a book and make a fortune. Sarah's face turned beet red, and she exploded with rage. Emily Sue, you bitch. She screamed furiously. You'll die a horrible death. Sarah screamed, her voice filled with venom. As soon as she finished, the overweight man standing not far behind her pulled out a glass bottle and began walking toward us. A sinister glint flashed in Sarah's eyes as she sneered. No matter how powerful you think you are, you'll die today. Before she could finish her threat, the man threw the sulfuric acid in his bottle, not at me, but at her. The sound of flesh sizzling and dissolving filled the air as Sarah collapsed to the ground, writhing in pain. The man's twisted grin widened as he poured more acid onto her. You thought you could deceive me? He growled. My sister's death was your doing. Today, you'll pay for it with your life. Ethan, who had been watching from the audience, sprang into action. He jumped onto the stage, shouting, You're insane. Stay away from Sarah. He pushed the man away, his face livid with rage. The man's grin turned even more menacing. So, you're one of her accomplices? Then you can die too. He pulled out a bottle of gasoline from his pocket and doused Ethan before he could react. Within moments, the man lit a match and threw it at him. It all happened so fast. By the time the audience realized what was going on and rushed to put out the flames, it was too late. Sarah's body was almost entirely corroded by the acid, and Ethan was left with half his body burned. Though he survived, his face was permanently disfigured, his eyes blinded, and the nerves in his right arm irreparably damaged, leaving him disabled for life. Sarah died not understanding why the man she had enlisted turned against her. But I knew. My private investigator had uncovered the man's history. His younger sister had been a freshman in college and in a relationship with a male classmate when Sarah had come between them, stealing her boyfriend. The betrayal had driven his sister into severe depression, eventually leading to her suicide. In my past life, Sarah had pinned the blame on me, leading to my ultimate downfall. This time, with the truth revealed, The man sought his vengeance on Sarah instead. As for Ethan, our parents abandoned him completely, not because of his physical disabilities, but because he had publicly betrayed me, his sister, by siding with Sarah and attempting to frame me. That betrayal crossed an unspoken line and exposed the true nature of his character. Ethan, still young, was sent to live in a nursing home with elderly residents. He was furious and tried escaping several times, but within days, he always returned. His appearance was horrifying. His body emitted an unbearable stench of decay, and he couldn't find work. With no money and no support from our parents, he had no choice but to crawl back. One day, he called me. "Emily, please, talk to Mom and Dad. Let me come home. I promise I'll behave." I coldly refused. "Ethan, you're disgusting. You reek of rot. And your face is too hideous to look at." He snapped, screaming at me. "Emily Sue, how can you treat me like this? I'm your brother." I laughed mockingly. "You remember you're my brother now? Funny, because when you were helping Sarah frame me, you seemed to forget. Did it ever cross your mind what would have happened to me if I hadn't been prepared with that video? I'd have been expelled, disgraced, doused in acid, and left to die." I took a deep breath, my voice cold as ice. "Ethan, I'll let you live, but only just. That's the extent of my mercy. After all, you are my brother. You were kind to me when we were little. That's the only reason I'm sparing you." As for Noah, when I took over the company, Noah's family business was the first to be swallowed up. His parents, deep in debt after taking out high-interest loans, fled overseas, leaving Noah behind, unaware of the truth. It wasn't long before loan sharks drove him to the brink of despair, nearly causing him to jump off a building. In his desperation, he came to beg me for help. The man who once carried himself with the polished grace of a gentleman now looked like a vagabond. He'd lost at least 20 pounds. His face gaunt and haggard. His entire demeanor worn and pitiful. "Emily, please help me," he pleaded, his voice hoarse. "Are you really going to stand by and watch them kill me? Just help me this once. And I swear, I'll do whatever you want. I'll be your dog if you want. I'll be loyal to you forever." I smirked, my tone dripping with mockery. Calling you a dog would be an insult to actual dogs. Honestly, with resources so limited these days, ridding society of a pest like you would be doing everyone a favor. I leaned in closer, my eyes glinting with cold amusement. "Don't worry, though. Out of respect for all the years we've known each other, I'll make sure your body gets a proper burial after you're gone." I kept my word. A month later, Noah was dead. His good looks had caught the eye of the loan sharks, who forced him into working as a male escort at a high-end club. One night, after being hired by a group of burly men, things went too far. The fun they had was so extreme that it killed him. I arranged for his body to be cremated, and then I disposed of his ashes in the hazardous waste bin. Poetic justice. Trash returned to trash.